We're doing some cast-ons that involve knitting in the round, starting at the center. This way that I'm going to show you next is you're going to take the yarn in your right hand, cross it over in the left, pull it out, and we're going to make a loop. What's special about this loop is the tail closes it. Here's the tail closes it. If you've made it so that this yarn closes it, stop and undo, and remember what you're going to do is take the yarn in the right, make a loop, stick the tail end into the loop, tighten it. Now, this creates a small knot. It's pretty big here with this super jumbo yarn, but it does create a small knot, and this cast on will make a small knot. Sometimes for lace you don't want a small knot, so this is something to consider. So make the loop a comfortable size. Leave the tail over there. Don't worry about the tail. It's going to get bigger as you work, so don't worry. We're going to start with a yarn over. We're going to bring the yarn over the needle and to the back. Now we're going to stick our needle into the loop, pull up a stitch, make a yarn over, stick the needle into the yarn, pull up a stitch, make a yarn over, stick the needle into the yarn, pull up a stitch, make a yarn over, stick the needle in, pull up a stitch, and do that till we have, in this case, my desired number, which is 8 stitches. Okay, so I have 8 stitches on my needle. If you're working with double points, you're going to not do what I'm doing, which is I'm just dividing the work evenly. 4 and 4 as if to work for magic loop. If you were working with double points, what you would do is you'd simply start knitting off one single double point onto your set of 4 double pointed needles. Alright, my tail is here, my working yarn is here, and I'm going to bring it all together and do my first round. So my last video, at one point I actually started to work with a tail, so don't do that. So I'm going to knit one, and then the next stitch is a yarn over. Let me see where that stitch is. Oh no, it's a knit stitch. There it goes. It's a knit stitch, and then a yarn over stitch and a knit stitch, and then I could turn my work. Oops. If I were working with double pointed needles, I'd be switching needles. I do not have double pointed needles this large, so I wanted to work with big needles and big stitches, so that's one of the reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. I have my 4 stitches here, and I'm going to make sure I have my loop. Alright, so here's my first stitch, the yarn over stitch, the knit stitch, the yarn over stitch, the knit stitch. Okay, so I've gotten round 1 done. Now that I've gotten round 1 done and I have the work divided evenly onto 2 needles, what I can do is this. I can take my tail and I can begin. I'm going to put it onto the cord part of the cast on so you can see a little better what I'm doing. I'm taking my tail, I'm pulling it tight as can be, and what I have is I've made a tight little eyelet round. It's not as evident now as it will be in another couple of rounds how tight this is. There is a disadvantage to this in that this will undo as you work. You'll have to tighten it, and when you go to finish it you'll have to weave it in. But this process will give you, here's the last stitch, so I divide the work back into 4 and 4. I'm going to do one more round just to make it a little clearer how tight and even this cast on is. There's my tail. Don't want to work with my tail. There's my needle and my stitch, and I'm going to knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 1. Yeah, these needles are slightly too small for this yarn, and I'm not working well because I'm looking through my camera viewfinder and not looking at my knitting, so it's sometimes a little hard for me to actually see what I'm doing, though it does help keep me in focus. So knit one yarn over, knit one yarn over, knit one yarn over, knit one yarn over, yarn over. Again, I'm going to bring the knitting to the circle of the center of the cable so that I can easily bring it round and bring the tail to the back and twist the stitches in. Now you see already what's happened is my little hole there has opened up. All I have to do is, there, see, you can clearly see a donut hole. And what's going to happen is I'm going to have to pull the stitch to close up the donut hole, and I'm going to have to do that every 2 or 3 rounds until I weave the tail in. You don't have to weave the tail in right away, but you should understand that as you work, there is the natural tendency for that slip knot to undo and make a small eyelet. And if you like the look of the eyelet, you can leave it the exact size you want by pulling and just till it's right where you want. Now, as I say, this cast on does leave you with a small knot. There's a small knot right there, but it's still much less of a knot than you might have with many other cast-ons. It's easier to join in the round, and it's easier to make sure that you haven't twisted your work. There are a lot of advantages to working with this cast-on for working in the round. So this is a disappearing loop. So now there are 3 possible ways to do a cast-on in the round. First way is the Emily Ochre cast-on. Another way is the double loop cast-on, and the third way is the disappearing loop cast-on. Call it disappearing loop. You can call this one, I don't know what, it's very hard to distinguish because they all have the same effect. And when they're done, it would be very difficult to know exactly which cast-on you used because they would all look the same. And how they would look would be as open as you want or as closed as you want, making a tight little eyelet and having your stitching arise from nowhere. So as you work, here's some ways to think about doing a cast-on when you're doing a knitting in the round, starting at the center.